Hey, I'm Dr. Juan Valdes with Reasons for Hope, and I'm glad you could join us this afternoon for questions and answers. We are living in some seriously complicated times. Think about it. When was the last time, I can't remember in my lifetime, a situation where everything across the globe was closing, airports closing, transportation closing, business closing, people being quarantined across the globe, not just in our country, but everywhere. Just to think of the economic impact that this is going to bring, just to think of the repercussions, this is like the domino effect will be something horrible. And this produces a lot of anxiety in our society. And obviously, anything that makes us uncomfortable, anything that makes man uncomfortable or man anxious, man has to find someone to blame. And I'm here to tell you that, or to respond to the blaming God issue. How many memes have I seen lately? A ton of them that blame God. There's one meme in where Jesus is saying in one box, I love you, and in the next box he's saying, here, have the coronavirus. Memes like that are basically saying, how could a loving God send the virus to people he loves? How could a loving God allow this to happen? Isn't God a good God? How would a good God allow that? Why would a good God allow that? These are the kind of questions that we grapple with, especially when we feel that something is not just, not right, that shouldn't be done. And then so obviously we blame God. He's the ultimate authority. The atheist uses this as an excuse not to believe in God, because if there was a God, he wouldn't allow this to happen. And those that are on the fence, well, they blame God. Yeah, he probably does exist, but what kind of a God is he that allows these kind of things to happen? And so I want to address these questions. It's a bunch of questions, but they all pretty much sum up and say the same thing. It questions God's goodness. Is God good? And if he is, how could we reconcile that with the coronavirus? Let me start by addressing some of the assumptions, faulty assumptions that are made by arguments like that. The first faulty assumption is to assume that God somehow owes us a world in which there's no suffering and pain. So when we believe, or when someone believes that God owes us a world with no suffering and pain, then every time we experience any kind of suffering and pain, we are going to call out to him and we're going to complain. How dare you? We're supposed to have a world where there is no pain and suffering. And my question to you is, why does God owe you anything? Why does God owe me anything? The creator of the universe doesn't owe us a thing. Now, mind you, his desire is to have a world in which there is no pain, no death, no suffering. That's the world he created. And that's the world he will restore. But in the interim, we're living in a world that we have created. We're living in a world where we have brought chaos into this. We do not deserve God's love and kindness and mercy and compassion, because we are constantly offending him. We constantly sin against him. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, he's the creator of the universe, and we treat him worse than we treat some of our enemies. And yet we expect him to be good to us. So the assumption that God somehow owes us something is a faulty assumption. God doesn't owe us anything. Now, there's another faulty assumption here. Some people say, well, how could God send this virus to us? Why would Jesus send this virus to us if he loves us? Well, the assumption here is that he sent it. My question is, how do you know that this was sent by God? Did you get a memo from him? Think about it. Did God somehow tell you, this is what I am doing, I am sending this to the world? I don't think anyone's gotten that memo. Now, don't misunderstand me. God can, he absolutely can send a virus, a plague, whatever he wants, because this is his creation. And if he feels that we have done something that deserves punishment, he is very, very capable of punishing us, and it would not be outside of his character. We don't like that. I'm sure this offends so many people. Oh, well, how could a loving God send a punishment? How could he punish us if he loves us? Well, I can't believe in a God that would do that. Well, stop and think about your reasoning. Stop and think about your logic for a minute. Okay? So when somebody kills somebody on the street and a judge sentences him to life in prison, Isn't that horrible? Life in prison without parole in a jail cell. You're basically putting a human being in a cage for the rest of his life. So, I mean, because that's bad, we don't believe in those judges, right? Those judges probably don't even exist. And if they do, they're not the kind of judges we like. You see the reasoning here? We don't mind when justice is forked out in our culture, but somehow we have a problem when God does it. He's the ultimate judge. He's the only one that really knows who's guilty and who's not. And by the way, we're all guilty. He's the only one that knows when we mess up. He's the only one that can give us the righteous justice, the right justice, the perfect justice that we deserve. Hence, the word grace is amazing. The word mercy is amazing because mercy says that God is giving us what we don't deserve. He's giving us life even when we don't deserve it. So to be upset at God because we can't believe in a God that would send the virus or send the plague or punish people, because that's a bad God, that's a mean God, that's assuming that God cannot do his job as the judge of the universe. And who are we to tell God that he cannot judge his creation? You see, we have to be consistent here. If there is a God, if he is the creator of the universe, as I believe that he is, if he is the God of the Bible, as I am sure that he is, then he's entitled to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, however he wants. And because he's all powerful, he can do it. And because he's just, he's always going to do it in a just way. Because he's good, he's always got the best intention in everything that he does. And because he's wise above anything, omniscient, he can do it. He knows exactly the best way to deal with mankind. Now, I say all of that to say that if God sent the virus, he can do that. Now, I'm not so sure that he did. I'm not going to say God sent this virus. What I'm going to say is he doesn't need to send it. We live in a fallen world. Viruses, bad bacterias, sicknesses, death is part of our world. Not because God did it that way, but because we introduced it. The fall of man introduced into this world sin, death, and suffering. And that's just a fact. Now, you don't have to believe that. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe in the Bible. You don't have to believe in anything. But here's the bottom line. Here's what you do need to believe. You do need to believe that we're living in a crisis. You do need to believe that the virus is real. You need to believe that death is real and everybody dies. You need to believe that we live in a fallen world in the sense that there are sicknesses and there are diseases and there's famines and there's all kinds of issues. Those are realities that we cannot hide from. What we can deny is that there's a God. And when we do so, where do we position ourselves? If you think going through a crisis like this with a God that would allow it is bad, try going through this crisis without a God, without someone to lean on, without someone to give you comfort and peace, without the Holy Spirit to strengthen you in the midst of this crisis, without hope of anything better in the future. Because if there is no God, there is no hope. When you walk away from the idea of God, you're walking away from the idea of hope. And let me tell you, the picture gets bleak. The picture gets ugly, uglier every minute that goes by. I mean, just read the literature. I don't have to make it up. Read the literature. Michio Kaku, the physicist, wrote a book. He just wrote a book saying that we should be thinking about leaving Earth and moving away because this Earth is about to die. The sun is running out of energy. What's that going to do to our planet? A slow, painful, cold death. An asteroid may hit our planet. Then we're going to die in a really ugly way. Our genetic decomposition, the genetic entropy, is taking us down a road where we're deteriorating. Within a couple hundred generations, we will be so deteriorated, we won't be able to reproduce, and we will become extinct. I mean, think about it. Every avenue, every road you look at is a bad road leading to death. Only in God, only by accepting the truth that God has revealed to us, do we have any hope whatsoever. So rather than blaming God, and rather than sitting here and acting as if we don't deserve anything evil or bad or anything to happen to us, that we are entitled to everything being perfect, why don't we think about what we can do in the midst of this crisis? But before I go there, I want one more faulty assumption, and this one comes from Christians. Sometimes we Christians have this idea that when something like this affects us is because we are in sin. Well, I got news for you. Everybody's in sin. Everybody sins. I mean, yes, does God punish sin? Absolutely. But you can be right in the center of God's will for your life and still experience affliction, problems, and don't blame God. Don't attack God for it. This is part of the world we live in. I was sharing with my congregation yesterday about the passage in Matthew 14, where Jesus sends his disciples ahead of him across the Sea of Galilee in the boat, and they get caught in a fierce storm and waves, and he has to come and rescue them. And one of the points I made to the congregation was this: why were they in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and why were they caught up in a storm? Because Jesus sent them. He told them to go. He sent them into the sea where they encountered the storm. So they were doing exactly what God asked them to do, and yet what? They had to deal with the storm. But the storm did not destroy them. As a matter of fact, the storm provided an amazing opportunity for their faith to be edified and knowing a God that could get them through the storm. And that kind of highlights what our attitude needs to be in this situation. Trust me, I have anxiety. Everyone I know has some level of anxiety. But in the midst of all of this, I also have the peace of God in my heart. And you can have it as well. Don't question whether God can or do it, whether he's a good God or not. What you need to be asking yourself is, how can I do something in the midst of this terrible crisis to make a difference in somebody's life? You know what's a worse crisis and what is a worse pandemic than the coronavirus? It's the human sinful heart that comes out during these events. Just look at it. The coronavirus is bad, but look at the human heart. People are price gouging. People are buying up materials and then reselling it at exaggerated prices because they know that we need them. Toilet paper, antibacterial. You've read the stories. People go to the store and instead of buying one case of water, which is more than what they need, they buy 7 cases and they don't care if the next person has no water. See, that human nature, that should really upset us. Of course, we would probably find some way of blaming God for that too. What should we as Christians be doing? If you're a believer, we should be helping our neighbor. If you know old people and people that are more vulnerable, here's a suggestion. Send them a text, call them, ask them what you can do for them. Can you buy their groceries? Can you take something to their house? Can you do anything to help them so that they are not exposed to this? How about helping your neighbor? How about making sure everyone that you can has what they need? If you come to a store and there's supplies that other people don't have, and you can buy some for them as well as for you, how amazing would that be? You see, use this opportunity to show the world the love of Christ. Some videos are coming out of China that are really amazing. The Chinese church, which has been underground up until now, during this crisis has come out. They're the ones helping in the hospitals. They're out there helping the people. They are risking their own lives and getting infected. But you know what? They are serving and they are sharing the peace and the love and the hope that we have in Jesus Christ in this very crisis. So don't come with this whole idea of it's God's fault. Let's just deal with what we have. We have a fallen world that we created ourselves. God can do whatever he wants. He is sovereign and he doesn't owe us anything. And yet, what did he do? He died on a cross for us. He gave us his only son to redeem us. He came into earth to help us escape this pain and give us eternal life, give us a hope in a world that was hopeless because we had rendered it hopeless. That's the God we serve. He's a God of love, and we need to respect him rather than attack him. I'm Dr. Juan Valdes. Thank you for tuning in.